Will we copy the last folder? No, I think today we're going to start from scratch again because it's so different. On that, welcome back everyone. It's COMP2112, that's Advanced Client-Side JavaScript, in the fall 2022 semester at Georgian College, and it's week 13, so second last week of class. And this is part one of our broadcast and recording together. And let's talk about some stuff, where we are and what we're doing today, what we're doing next week. Okay, let's talk about that. So a couple of things. So this week is an intro to Express. We're going to talk about Express middleware. The goal is to try and recreate our 5-page site today with Express to give you everything you need for your assignment, your final assignment for this semester. So that is the goal. We also have an in-class exercise that's due on Sunday that I've posted, and we will adjust stuff. We have to talk about one thing that's kind of like the elephant in the room for me, which is the final test. What are we going to do next week for the final test? How is that going to go, and all that kind of stuff. Typically, what we would normally do is I would hold the final test in class on the Monday morning. That's what I would normally do, 8 o'clock. I'm not going to do that this semester. What I'm going to do instead is like what we did in the midterm test, which is I'm going to release your test on Monday. You'll have the entire week to get it done anytime because it's coinciding with your final assignment, all right, which is assignment number 3. There is no assignment 4. I've removed assignment 4 from this course because of the amount of work, I think, as well as the level of difficulty. It seems that many of you are struggling to understand all of the concepts. So I want to make sure that it is doable. The final test will be kind of an extension of what we've been doing, kind of this week, last week, kind of thing, and so on. And most likely it's going to be, based on the things that we've done already. Most likely I will give you a starter project, something to start with, that is very familiar to you. So something that we've been working with. And I'll ask you to fill in the blanks. That's probably what it's going to be like. Okay, just to let you know ahead of time. Will you be limited to come in on the Monday and get it done? Will I force you to come in on the Monday? The answer is no, I won't. Okay, so I think it doesn't make any sense if we're going to have the whole test go from the Monday to the Sunday, or let's say to the Friday, at least Monday to Friday. I can't do it till Sunday for a couple of reasons, because I need to get everything marked right for you guys, so that way it's kind of in line with everything. And so that's why it's going to be due on the Friday. And that'll be Friday at midnight again. You'll have the entire week to get it done. But it's coinciding with your final assignment, and I'm not going to give you a lot of load. I'm going to meter the test, so measure it for about 2 to 3 hours max. Okay, so it shouldn't be something that you can't go and complete within 2 to 3 hours. I would say it's going to be that kind of test. Okay, so on that, since I'm not going to force you to come in next week, my thoughts are, I can come in and we can have a conversation about it, but for me to come in and say, here's your test, and then see you later, I'm going to come in for, for let's say 15 minutes and then answer your questions. I just don't think it's worth it for next week. So what I think I'm going to do next week is also do it remote. I'm just letting you know ahead of time, so that way you have a chance to kind of do it from home. I will give you the details of the test 8 o'clock in the morning on the Monday next week. So I'll have all that ready to go, and it'll give you enough time to, kind of settle in and understand what I'm looking for and all that kind of stuff. I will host office hours for the remainder of the time next week. So it won't be like there's no lecture. I'm not going to give you obviously any new material. So things like if you still have difficulty, if you want help with some concept or whatever for the final week, that is what I'm going to be using the remainder of the time next week for. And it could be one-on-one. It could be something that you guys drive me to do. If you guys want me to go and show you something that is missing, that's still something that is not, understandable or whatever, that's what we use next week for more than anything else. Okay. So questions around next week, any concerns, first of all, about next week? I know it's a lot of work. I also know that, and that's why I'm kind of trying to reduce it as much as possible. I don't want it to be something that's undoable for you. Okay, that's not what I want. All right, on that, let's get to what we did last week. Last week, we talked about Node. What is that? We also did a brief Node and TypeScript demo, very brief. We kind of talked about how to make a server and all that kind of stuff. And we also went through the labor. I'll talk about that. I told you last week, I said, this is kind of the long way to do it. This is the tough way to do it. And this week, I want to show you some easier ways of getting things done and starting off a little back-end server for your for the stuff that you're doing. So stuff that I want to talk about this week is all of this, but we're going to go through it a little bit quicker in terms of the theory, and I'm going to get right to the practice part as fast as possible. I'm also going to do a brief demo on Express and TypeScript at the end, and only enough to give you what you need for your assignment, which is what I want you guys to do. Okay. Okay, so what the heck is Express anyway? Well, I always think about Express as something that's layered on top of Node.js. So whenever we look at Node, we always think about Node as bare bones. That's what it is. Okay, it's a bare bones backend based on JavaScript. With a single event thread. That's what it's for, basically to listen to any of any requests, and it responds with something that you ask it to do. That was what we talked about last week for the most part. So this guy, TJ Holowaychuk, basically what he did, he's a backend developer, and he created something called Express. And what he wanted to do with it was, it's still minimalist, but he wanted to build on top of everything that we have in Node.js. And so that way it's going to be a little bit more in terms of what we're getting. Okay, so that's how it works. So Express gives us way more than what we get with Node.js. And what I mean by that is it adds functionality that is very common. Okay. Let me talk about a couple of things about what Express gives us. By the way, we always can find documentation. The latest documentation about Express is here on the Express.js website. There are some things about the Express.js website and Express in general that we have to talk about in terms of how things are moving along. They're moving right now from version 4.18.1 to version 5. It's been ongoing for a while. They're in beta right now. So there are some changes going on, and I fully suspect that within the next year or so, we're going to have a complete revamp of what Express is, because how popular it is and how everyone uses Express in the back end hasn't changed for a while overall. And I fully expect this is going to change. Getting started is a great spot to understand how to install Express and everything else. And I think the documentation here is pretty good in terms of everything else. The Express generator, which we're going to talk about later on, is something that also needs a bit of a revamp. In terms of how it works. You're going to see that we're going to run it, and then we're going to modify it to crap. Like, it's going to be completely different than when it starts off with. It's almost to the point where at this point, because how much modification I'm going to do, it's almost worth not even using it and just starting from scratch. But it does give us it does help us a little bit in terms of speed. That's all it is. It's just that I replaced pretty much everything in there so that it is, like I said, more modernized and everything else for what we need. There is also it talks about how to do basic routing, which is what you need to do for your assignment. It talks about how that looks and all that stuff. And it also is going to talk about other things here as well. Great examples, static files, how to load them, and a bunch of stuff. So all the stuff that you need is here, okay? And it says how to move to Express 5 and how that works. It's still, again, like in beta. Again, please don't use Express 5. We're not going to cover that in this semester. It's out of scope, and it's actually not quite done. Okay, so that's where Express is. The Express generator is the stuff that we're going to be talking about later on, like I said. All right, so that is where you find Express, and Express is built upon another framework called Connect, actually. So Connect was another way, another kind of a third-party application that was added on top of, or a plugin that was added on top of Node, and it gave us the ability to have a routing system more than anything else. So we've seen routing systems already. We did React, we did routing, okay, and we did front-end routing. Now we're going to do Express, and we're going to do back-end routing, and we're going to show you a little bit of that. And this again will be nicely, hopefully, it'll nicely dovetail into what you're going to do next semester with Rich. Okay, so that's the idea with this. And actually, if anything, this particular lecture is, I would say, the one that I've been building up to the entire semester. Just try and get you to the point where you're ready to go to the next level. Okay, so this is what I'm hoping that you're going to be closer to feeling more comfortable after this one. So far we've been using a single server.js file, or in our case server.ts file in our application. However, when we use Express and the Express generator, we'll talk about how to better structure our application, and we'll also learn a little bit about EJS, the EJS templating engine, what that is. And let me just show you what that is. If I go to EJS, as an example, then there is an EJS.co website. EJS is a templating engine, right? Think about this as your view engine. We're not going to use React here, okay? So React is something that we've been using so far on the front end with nothing on the back end. Here, you need some kind of templating engine for to use with Express. And out of the box, React doesn't work with Express. You have to use something like this. Now, it's not like you can't use React. You can modify your template. You can make your own templates and stuff too. It's just that it's, again, the modification that's required is outside the scope of this course. So we're just going to talk about something like this. EJS probably for me is the easiest to use. There are other templating engines as well, but this is the one we're going to use. And notice the first thing it shows you is this, which is less than % equals and % greater than. Anything that's going to be inside of these brackets, I want you to think about them as the curly braces that we saw in React. We can inject code just like this in our EJS pages. All EJS pages that we're going to see later on today are going to be generated. Okay, so again, I don't want you to think about that it's actual HTML again. It's very similar to the idea that we had with React, where the React JSX stuff that we learn with React is it's actually not HTML, it's JSX, and it gets converted or emitted. It gets created, generated into HTML after everything has been done. Same thing here with EJS. EJS is not ready. It's almost like a partial part or a part of HTML. You see, it looks like HTML, and then what we do is we spin it, and all of a sudden, bam, it becomes something that is HTML at the end after the server serves up those files. So that is kind of what EJS is in a nutshell. We're going to talk about this again, but I'm showing you how this is the view engine part. There's a couple of components in Express, and the view engine, the front end, we're going to be using is this, okay? And if you go here to get started, again, this is the how it works. You can install it manually. You can even use EJS without, Express on the back end of the Express generator. It works actually for even using it on the front end. So as a templating engine, it's totally fine to do it. So that it's kind of a standalone tool, as well as something that you can include with Express. And this is how we're going to be using it. Okay, so that is EJS. So and of course, we have to add some kind of routing scheme, which we're going to talk about in a sec. Well, in a bit. So we install Express like this, and we've seen how to install it with either NPM or Yarn, and as well as we can also get type support for TypeScript like this. Okay, this is what we're going to be doing later on. When we do that, our package.json file is going to look somewhat like this when we use it. If I was going to make an Express kind of a project, just like for in-class exercise 10, as an example, I might do something that looks like this. Okay, now I'm not going to do this because in-class exercise 10 is going to be your Express generator project. And instead of going through this and going through the entire PowerPoint, it's going to take a lot of time to do it. I'm going to intercut between the PowerPoint today and the actual project. And the reason for this is I got to get you coding as fast as possible because of the time frame that we have. So we're going to come back to this stuff. But first, let's make our own Express project a little bit. And I'm just going to jump to, just for practice, what it would look like to do a little server. And it looks like this. Okay, so remember how we kind of ran into all these things last week. And I'm just going to bring up our little project from last week just to compare. So if I was to look at GitHub, and let's just go to our project from last week. So here it is on GitHub, right? And just going to take a look at that server.ts file. It looks like this. You can see that it's quite long. We talked about looking things up to do a MIME lookup because we wanted to make sure which kind of file we're loading and so on. That was kind of a bit complex. We also had a little function to read HTML. We created a custom 404 page last week. There was a bunch of things that we did, and we made a server.listen. We hosted some files. We did a little bit of routing, very, very simple routing, so that when you go to your page by default, then it takes you to index.html if you can't find anything else. That's how we kind of did it last week. And we also talked about different things that were built into Node. For example, the file system module, as well as the path module and the HTTP module. Those are primarily what we used last week, as well as the URL module to create this thing. Okay, now let's take a look at what Express would look like. And this almost does the exact same thing, this right here. Okay, so let's use this just as a sample. We're not going to use this as during class exercise 10, just to get you warmed up is what I want to do with this one. So I'm going to make a brand new project today, and then we're going to overwrite this stuff. We're going to delete it. So you can watch if you want to, but I'm going to show you what this looks like and how it feels. I highly encourage you to follow along because this is what's going to be the thing that we're going to create today. But again, everyone does it and learns things differently. So I'm just going to make a brand new project here. So again, new folder, and we're going to call this COMP2112 in the fall 2022 semester. And then it's week 13. Sorry, there's week 13. And I'm just going to drag and drop here into our project structure. There we go. And what I want to do first is do that whole setup that we did earlier, which is let's set up everything we need in Express. And notice that I have no folders right now. So let's make a brand new, let's start with yarn init, the yarn initializer, to initialize our package.json file. So that's the first thing we would do. So I'm going to say yarn init. Again, I got nothing else. Here's my assumptions. You've got Node.js installed. You've got yarn installed. You've got TypeScript installed. You need all these things. Okay, so let's start this off. So if I do a yarn init, then it's going to ask me to go through my little questionnaire. I'm going to call this something like we said before, which is ICE. So it's going to be something like COMP2112 in the fall 2022 semester, and this will be ICE 10. Okay, that's what we're going to call it, or part of ICE 10, right? And let's go to question. Version 1 is fine. Description is a demo project for COMP2112 in the fall 2022 semester, ICE 10. Yeah, that's what it is. Entry point will be server.js. Again, we're not going to use TS. TS is for us. JS is for the technology to use. No URL yet. Your author, this would be your name you put here. I'm going to put my name. And then this, and that's it. So that should set up your package.json file. And that's this part. I want to install also the modules that we need that we talked about. So I want to install all the pieces that we're going to require for today. And the first one is just Express. So let's do a yarn add Express, right? That's the one we want. And then if we do that, it's just going to launch Express. We also want a dev dependency for this. So what I mean by that is we're going to use yarn add at types and Express is what we want to use here. And minus dev puts it into the dev dependency spot in our package.json, okay? So that's what that does. You can see that that added the express and this part. And we also want to add in our add types for Node, right? So we want also support for Node.js with TypeScript. So we're going to say yarn add at types Node and then minus dev for the TypeScript support for Node. I can also add other common libraries that we had before. So if I say yarn add jQuery, right? We've added that in. How about Bootstrap? We will want to add that in maybe as well as anything else we want to add in. And I don't know, Fort Awesome, you know, that we said kind of here. So we said that there'd be here. Just going to go with this one. So our at Fort Awesome slash font awesome free. So at Fort Awesome slash font awesome dash free. So that is all the stuff that's going to go there. Let's add that in. And of course, we need Popper.js. So let's do that. Yarn add at Popper.js slash core, right? That gets added in there too. Those are the things. And we're also going to add in yarn add at types. And if there's anything else we need in here, did I add anything else? Just jQuery, Express, and Node, right? And maybe jQuery then. Slash jQuery and minus dev. So that will be pretty much everything that we had in our PowerPoint for the most part. Okay, so that's everything we would need if I was going to have, you know, let's say Bootstrap and all that stuff. This gets us going. I'm also going to add in our TypeScript file for the first time, and this is something that may persist, you know, in the next part of our project. So I'm going to call this the tsconfig .json file, and just to save time from last day, we actually had a tsconfig.json file that we can use. So I'm going to go back out to here to our project on GitHub, and I'm just going to go to our tsconfig.json file. And you can see that all of this is what we want to use. Remember I said this is the one-time cost. I meant it. We're not going to redo it. So I'm just going to grab this file right here. And I'm just going to populate this inside of your chat, just in case you want to try and do that as well. There it is. I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it inside of our project right away. So I'm just going to say that this would be our tsconfig.json file. Save. So now I have everything to get going. Okay, but I do need a server.ts file, and I do need to transpile and all that stuff. So let's do that. First, let's add in a server.ts file. So new file, we're going to say server.ts. There it is. And I'm going to transpile by pressing Control-Shift-B like we've done in the past. Control-Shift-B. All right, so that's going to make it, we're going to go to the watch task here. And it should transpile this server.ts to a server.js, which is what we want to need. Okay, so let's go to my server.ts file, and then let's take that stuff right from our PowerPoint slide. So this is the PowerPoint slide stuff, and I want to do this really quickly just to explain how this all works for you. And here it is. So that's our PowerPoint slide stuff. And I want to just populate this right inside of our server, and let's see how that works. So a couple things off the top that we want to do, save. We get a bit of an error because we're using a couple things here that are not compliant with TypeScript. How do I convert my requires to something that works with TypeScript, my friends? How do I do that? How do I do this? How do I change this up? What would you do differently? Help me out. You can come on the mic or you can type it in, whatever you prefer. So I want to convert these requires up here so that they work with TypeScript. How do I do that? We did it last week. And actually, we've been doing it all through React. Hey, imports, thank you. So we want to say import express, and instead of require, we're going to say from, right? This is what it is. So if you ever see require up online for Node, it's this, and this takes away some of our errors, right? Once we've done this, import express from express, we did this. Exports default is equal to app, right? Now remember, what do we do? How did this look for React? We did this. We said exports defaults is equal to app. I mean, we could do this. Let's go back and take a look at some of our stuff we did last time, right? So if we look just a couple weeks back, so it's not last week, let's say, but the week before. So if we went to week 11, and we still had a React app right here, right? So here's our React app, and this is kind of what it would look like when we're using a component in React, right? And this is a great lookup, as an example. Let's look at the header component, which we're going to look at again. If I look here at the header component, it's export default and then the name. So that's the way we could do it here. Instead of exports.default, we can just say that export default and then the name that we want to export in this particular case, which is app. Okay. So it's the same thing. If I press save, then it transpiles everything and it creates our something that's compatible with JavaScript. Okay, so notice the default, it just changed it back to exports.default. It converted it over to what we did before. There's my server.ts now. Wonderful. I want to run this thing. One thing we're missing in our file for our package.json is our scripts component. Let's go back and let's take a look at last week's stuff, right? So we did in our last week, right? If you remember, just guiding you here. So you can always take a look at the stuff we have on GitHub here. If I go here and if we look at our last week's package.json, we also had this scripts where we said node -- watch server.js. We talked about how the -- watch is built into Node.js now. We can use this exact line here. So I'm going to copy this. It's the watch step. Yep. It's always the watch step. Yep. I can totally do that, Elena. Just one sec. But this is what we want to do here. I'm going to review. I'm just going to get you to that point, put it up on GitHub and review. Okay, just give me a sec. So if you see these scripts start, this part here is what we want to add into our project. So again, I'm just going to go here and populate this on do this again. So that's the part that's missing from our package.json. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that back in here. So right here under license, I'm going to just populate that little piece, which is our scripts start node -- watch server.js. Okay, that's what it does. And this is pretty much everything we need to get going, right? And what I want to do is I want to run this thing. Okay. So let's review what we did. Okay, first of all, and this is for everybody here. So first we made our package.json, which should look like this. So please make sure your package.json looks like mine. Next, we created a tsconfig.json file, which is the same one that we used last week. I just give you that copy paste kind of thing. All right. Third thing we did was we made our server.ts file, which is pretty much this one. Okay. And it was the exact same one from our PowerPoint document. So there's no difference there, right? And after we did this, we transpiled with Control-Shift-B. Control-Shift-B is something we need to remember now. Okay, before with React, we didn't need to remember it. As long as we ran a server, we're good to go. Here, it doesn't do that. Okay, so we have to remember to transpile for the first time. Now, it's not like you can't automate this process, right? So if you were going to think about it and you didn't want to ever think about transpiling again, you could put it into something like your package.json, where you could have a transpile step. So your start, what it actually does is first it transpiles, and you can make it so that the transpile step is, instead of using Control-Shift-B, you can do a TSC, right? So a TSC command might be the first thing, and then you run node, right? Because remember, TSC is the TypeScript command on the terminal window. So you can actually combine those two things, so you never have to do that again. I like to separate them because I want to have my transpiling task running in Visual Studio Code, but you could totally separate them or make them in one. So when you type in yarn start, then it'll do it all for you. Okay, so And if you think about how that works, if we just typed it here in the terminal, just to show you this for a second, again, I'm not moving forward yet. I'm just showing you. If I said something like, just by itself, if I said node and then server.js, then it would just run, right? So it would kind of respond like we normally do. So that's the typical command, Control-C. And if I did a node watch and then server.js, then it would be in watch task mode. So anything that changed would show up here. Okay, so that's one way we can do it. Well, what if I wanted to transpile and at the same time as do something else? So I want to run a node command and I want to run a TSC command. So if I did that, if I said TSC, that transpiles. That's just what it does on its own. It kind of looks through your project and transpiles anything to TypeScript, right? Or from TypeScript to JavaScript. So I want to run both. I want to do TSC, and then I want to do node, right? And then do this watch task, as an example. Can I do that? And I can't, right? I can't do it that way. So how do I run, two tasks at the same time, as an example? So if you look that up, just to show you this. So running multiple tasks, right? Node.js with start script. So how do I do that, right? So how can I run multiple npm scripts in parallel, right? So how does that work? And if you look that up, you can use definitely concurrently. That's definitely a way of doing that, but I really don't want that. Notice it says it kind of does this and. We used only one and or two ands, but now this is in a Unix environment as an example. Otherwise, we have to run something that looks like this, and that's why I don't typically do it, okay? But if I was going to do like in a Unix-like environment or Linux environment, it would be TSC and then 1% and then node --watch and then server.js, and that's how it would work normally in a Linux environment. Here it doesn't work, and that's why we do it separate. Okay, on that though, we can still run yarn start, and then now it's ready to go. Okay, and now let's see what we would look at if we were going to look at our local host. So here, in order for us to see our files, we're going to go to localhost 3000, and now way at the top corner it says hello world. Okay, so that's so far what we've done. All we've done here is repeat what we did before. So that's how kind of fast we went in terms of getting our little Express server going. And let's go back and review how this all works and all that kind of stuff, right? So again, we added in some files here. Our server.ts works like this. We import Express. We create an Express application. And what we do here is when we say const app is equal to Express, what I'm actually doing is instantiating an object of type Express, and I'm storing its value here in the app variable or constant. We're making a port, and there is this piece right here, process.environment. That's what this part stands for, port. And then there's this double pipe symbol, which normally refers to or in programming. I'll be okay this morning, or, and then 3000. So it basically says here, we want to get a port, but if you're running this online, like on a server, like render, as an example, then we can't use port 3000 on render, because port 3000, that means like my app is going to take port 3000 for all of render.com. That doesn't make sense. Render is going to give you its own port that you're going to be running on, right? So we use process.env.port, where M stands for environment, when we want to get our port. It automatically is generated by the server wherever we're hosting our files online. So that's what this part is. Okay, we need that. And then we have this app.use / and then function. Okay, now again, we can convert this to an arrow function, so it looks a little bit more modern. Okay, we can still do that. And it basically says, when I go to the default root, right, / then I want you to respond with hello world, okay? And I can make other roots like that too. I can say app.use, and then I can say /home, and then I can have my own little thing for home where I can say, welcome home. Let's try this out and see if that works. So if I say something like, welcome home, right? How about something different? Then that's how it'll work. Now, remember, this needs to be restarted. So that's why we're watching, we're running yarn yarn start, and start is a kind of using the watch task for Node.js, right? If I press save, then it's going to be rerunning, or it just restarts our server. We talked about how restarting our server is super important because when we create our server, we create an object, and that object is immutable, right? Just like last week, it's the same here for this week. The object is immutable. So any change we make to our server, unless we restart the server, it won't take hold, and our website won't see the changes until we restart the server, because we have an app that, or almost like an object that we've made, and we're going to be using that object to respond to things. And until we restart that process, until we regenerate that object, it's the exact same object that we had from the previous load. So that's why we need to restart every single time we make a change. And that's why we need some kind of watch task down here to watch for any changes to restart our server. Okay, so that's what we still need to do. If I go back out here and refresh, you can see now it's the same, but I could go up to /home, and we should say something like, it should say hello or welcome home, right? That's what we're expecting it to do, right? But unfortunately, it doesn't do that, right? And the reason for this is because it intercepts this, and it says, when I go to /, that's the thing that it's going to respond with, okay? This isn't quite routing. If I was going to take this away, let's suppose I took this piece away and I saved, right? It's going to restart my server. And if I went back to refresh, you're going to see it's going to say welcome home no matter what thing I put in here. I can put in something like this and press enter, and it's still going to say, as long as it doesn't make any sense, it's going to say, you know, if I go like this, it's going to say cannot get. Let's refresh. If I go like this, home, it's going to say welcome home. If I go to like this, it's going to say cannot get, and cannot get means I don't know where you're taking me because there is no route defined for /. Basic routing is not implemented yet, okay? So it's only for this route. All right, so that is your little server, and it doesn't seem to be very functional. And if you look through the PowerPoint slides, the next version basically gives us that information about how that would work with TypeScript. So that is your import statement and export default app. And we just used app use. And what the heck is app use anyway, app use is something called middleware. And this is where people get confused. They're like, what is middleware? It's like something that goes in the middle, a function or series of functions that go in the middle between your request and your response. Okay, so this is kind of the way it works. And Express is based on or accepts a bunch of middleware functions that you can plug in as you go, right? So first off, when we were using Node, bare bones. Express layers on top of Node and extends its functionality. And when we're using Express, we are using Node in effect. But at the same time, we also have this middleware system that suddenly becomes active and able for us to, the ability for us to use it, enabled for us to use. And so what we can do is we can plug in additional functionality in between our request and the server's response. Okay, so that is what app use does. Okay, it's a middleware function. I'm going to go into something we use here. I used to use NodeMon. I still don't think it's a bad thing to use NodeMon. It just gives us a little bit more information about how to use it. And here I talk about the application object, which is what we just said. The application object that I make is immutable, right? We have the request and response objects, which we are very familiar with. We've been using them pretty much most of the semester, request response. And I'm not going to go through this. This is just talking about how the request response stuff works. But I want to talk about middleware functions. And so for the most part, like it says here, Express is comprised wholly of middleware functions. So from the beginning to the end, so we have a request object, there's some middleware functions, and then we have the response that comes from the server. That's how it works. And like it says here, this chaining of middleware allows you to compartmentalize your code and create kind of reusable pieces that you want to use, okay? So here's our app.use that we had back over there. Well, we can make our own little middleware function that looks like this. Notice the next method. The next method is actually built into Express. It's not something that we're making up. And what it does is basically says, I want to do this, and then I want to do this, and then I want to do something else. So if I was going to go back to our code, let's suppose I wanted to make our own little thing again. So I said app.use, let's copy paste this. Let's see how this might work. If I said app.use this, and then I want to go home, and this one will be something like, you know, hello world, right? And this one will be welcome home, but I want to go from here to here. I want to have both of these things in play, right? Then what I can do is I can say something like next, right? Now, what will this do is I need to actually include request, response, and next up here in my kind of my function. So request, response, and next, right? And next is going to actually allow the next function to kick off, which is this one. All right, let's see if this works. So save. It reruns my server. And if I go back out to here, then if I go to this, it's going to show me hello world. I'm hoping that I can do something that looks like this, and it's going to give me the next thing, which is welcome, right? But it doesn't. And the reason for this is because although I'm saying this next function that I'm trying to go to this piece, it's not quite doing what it's supposed to do. And we're not quite at routing yet. And notice how we have two parts. We have request, response, and next here. And then we have request, response, and next down here for these two little functions, right? Let's see if we can do the same thing by putting the next function on our other route. And let's see if that helps us out. So if I go request, response, and next, right? And that maybe that's going to help us, maybe not, right? With our home/home link. And if I go back out here and refresh, do we get something that says, welcome home? And the answer is we don't, right? Not yet. Because although we're using app use, I'll talk about what use does in a second. It basically uses these two things. It's either one right now or the other. We haven't implemented any kind of routing in any way. And since we only have, we're implementing one route, it doesn't still know how to get to this one. Okay, we're gonna figure out how to get to this one from this one in a second. Back to this. So, but however, we can make a middleware function. And let's suppose we want to make a little middleware function that before we get to this piece, we want to do a, kind of a console log. And I want to console log the request object. Let's see if we can do this. So as we move through from this one to this one, okay? So let's do this piece. I'm just going to copy this. This is the piece I'm going to add in so you can see it. Here it is. And I'm going to take that piece here. I'm going to put it inside of here. So I'm at the top. I'd like to go to home, but we're not able to route yet, right? Here's my request, response, and next object. And I want to kind of go from this piece to this piece to this piece. Let's see if it actually does the console log, right, when I run it. So again, if I do a request, so if I go back to home, right, and if I do any kind of request here, then I'm hoping to get a console log, and take a look how that works. So it says, I'm getting this console log, and this console log is happening every single time I go to do a request. And take a look how many times I get it. I got it a bunch of times, right? Like multiple times, it looks like, right? But actually, the console log is for the request object is quite large. The request object is actually made up of a bunch of things here, as you can see. And it gives us not just the request object, but the response object. And it looks like it's pretty big in terms of what we're getting, okay? So that's what it is. If I do it again, if I go back and refresh the server again, you're going to see we're going to get this again, okay? All of this stuff, because that is that's what's kicking out our request object right here. And notice this happens every single time we do the request. And that's why we have a problem with this. These two things trigger at the same time, right? And because these things are the exact same, /home and / this one /, both of them take hold. If I reverse this order, order matters with middleware functions. So if I take /home first and put it up here, right? If I put that up here and I put / down here, then, and let's make sure we put our next function in here as well, because we want to call the next middleware function. How does this work? And let's just remove this piece because this is going to be annoying for us to see that big output every single time. So save. And if we go all the way down to the bottom, we can see that the server restarted. And if I go back out to here, it still says hello world. See, that's cool. But if I do /home, then I do now get hello, welcome home. All right, so that's interesting. So if I go /, right, then I get hello world. And if I go /home, I get welcome home. Huh, how come it worked this time and it didn't work last time? Well, the reason why is because / is the default route, right? And if I put this first, then it's going to ignore, no matter what you do, anything that comes after. But if I put a bunch of routes here, let's suppose I put home, and I also put in a sequence, by the way, and I also put something like about, and let's say welcome to our about page, right, as an example. And let's just put those two in there, and I run that. And if I go to about now, right, then it says welcome to our about page. If I go to home, then it says welcome home. And if I go to / it says hello world. Okay, so that's kind of like how middleware functions work. Middleware functions work like it goes to this function, and then it goes to this function, and then it goes to that function, and then it returns a response. I make a request, the request gets piped in, and I want you to think about this for a second. This is how Express works. From this one to this one to this one. That's what happens. It takes in all of those kind of requests, and then it builds up the response object. It kind of adds this one to this one, and this one to this one, and then finally comes out with the response object at the bottom. That's what it does. And it does it in sequence. That's why it's important to do things in the proper order when it comes to Express. Okay. By the way, notice that down in here, it says cannot set headers after they are set to the client. And the reason why we're getting this weird error, this is actually an error that we're getting here when we start looking at things. And the reason why is because I'm trying to resend our page multiple times. And the send method is actually going to send the request back to the object itself. So this is kind of incomplete in the way we're doing it. Okay, and that's where we're getting these really weird errors. It's not stopping our server, but it's not actually making it any better. Let's go on and talk about routing. So we just talked about some middleware examples, and using app use means that this middleware will be called for every call of the application. For every single request, it's going to call all the things that says app use in it. All right, one after the other. That's what it's going to do. And the reason why it's giving us that error is because we're trying to send or rewrite the stuff that we're seeing on the page multiple times, and we don't need to do that. Okay. So here's how it kind of works in a nutshell. We get an incoming request. It passes it to the first middleware function, right? And then we build up the response send object. That's what we do. Okay. And then we get the next one and the next one. And finally, after we built up all of the response send objects, it goes back to the response object, and that's the one that you're going to get at the end. Okay, so a bunch of middleware functions kind of add up, so you get the last thing. Okay, so middleware functions are just exactly that. They're like functions that lie in the middle of all of our requests. That's how it works. And here are some types of middleware functions that you need to know about. So application level middleware, we use app use. Router level middleware, which we haven't done yet, router.use. Okay, built-in middleware. So if I want to use Express Static actually allows us, it's a little function that's built into Express that allows us to serve up static files. Okay, that's what Express Static is. And I'm just going to pause there for a second, and let's see how this works with what we have currently. Okay, now remember online, I want to go up online here, and I want to look at back to the Express documentation. So if I go back to Express documentation, there is a link here that says static files. So these are our static files. How to serve up static files. Okay, so I'm going to give you this link. Here it is. So what we need to do is do something that looks like this. App.use, remember that's application level middleware. Express.static, that's express level middleware. So it's almost like I want to have my first piece of middleware. I'm going to use something that looks like this. Okay. And express static public means that anything that's in the public folder are the things that we want to use. Anything that's in the public folder. Okay. Okay. So how will this work when I want to serve up public files? And it gives us some example of how to do that. Remember, we used the path method from last week. We can say something like, I want to app use, and let's suppose I go / right? And then I want to say express.static, and then I want to path.join to my current directory name of my project and the public folder, if I had one, okay? So I want to kind of talk about this in a second, and let's do that. So let's do that in our files. So that at the top, I want to still use path. I want to import path from path. That's built into, remember, it's built into Node.js. So there's nothing for us to do there, okay? And then instead of doing all this business, let's just get rid of all this, right? And I want to use some middleware. Instead of doing some kind of request and response, I don't want to do this. I want to do, something that looks like this. Okay, so I'm literally going to lift this line here from the website, and I'm going to give that to you right now on your chat, so you don't have to type it in, because we want to move on from this. This is just an example, just to get us moving, so you understand how Express is layered. And I want to replace that with this. So I want to say, instead of app use static, we're going to app use /, okay? And it's going to say express.static path.join the directory name and public. Well, there is no public folder here. Let's save that. And I want to go and add in a public folder called public. There it is. Inside of our public folder, let's put an index.html file. So I'm going to add an index.html file in here. And just like we've done in the past, I want to make a quick HTML file. I'm just going to use Emmet, HTML5, and we're just going to add in something that says, welcome to Express. There it is. And then down in here, we're going to have an H1 tag that says something like welcome to Express. Okay, let's see if we can read this index.html file by going to our index, right? Let's see how this works. So does Express static serve up our file? How does that work, right? So if I go back to running our code, right? If I go back to this, and if I go to refresh, then it says, welcome to Express. Okay, so let's review again what I did. So back to server.ts. Server.ts, I added the path, right? Path is built into Node. Then we use this app.use / app.use is middleware, right? And instead of getting a request, response, and next object, instead of doing that, I'm saying, no. I want to serve up static files, all the static files in a particular website. I can use express static, and I can path join my directory name. In this case would be something like C:/ /users Tom OneDrive, wherever my files are, desktop, COMP2112, COMP2112 -F2022 -week13 / this file, and so on. And instead of doing all, that's what directory name is. And public looks at the public folder. That's where it looks at. And it combines the public folder into the search criteria for my path. So whenever I want to search something, I get there. And I'm giving it a default file, index.html. Okay. What if I actually did that? What if I said, I want to see index.html here? So index.html still gives me this. Okay, interesting. What if I had something else? What instead of having index.html, I had another file? Let's make a duplicate of index.html and call it about.html. So I want to duplicate this. So I want to copy and I want to paste. And we'll just rename this to about.html really quickly and just say this is going to be the about page. So we'll say about us, right? Okay, we won't change the title. So this is our about page. Let's see if it actually sees the about page. Can I go there as well? So I have my index. Can I go to my about page? Back to this. And if I go to, let's make sure I save. How about that? Save, transpile, right? And then once I'm there, if I go back to my page, can I go refresh? Yes, I get welcome to Express. But what if I put in about.html? Does it do that too? Can I go there? And it does. This is like automatic routing, okay? With limitations, okay? So there is no, it's almost like I'm surpassing or going around anything that has to do with Express. I'm not even using Express really. It's just almost like a pass-through is what these static files do. Okay, so that's what it is. I can layer this. I can put anything I want. It'll read all the MIME types. It'll read CSS. It'll read JavaScript. It'll read JSON. It'll read everything, right? Just like this. I can literally just use this little line right here and make my own website the exact same way I had it before. In fact, I can even serve React, all my React websites, right through this little line right here. Okay, one line to rule them all, literally. Okay, and to demonstrate this, we can take all the files that we had from React and put them inside my public folder. So whatever I had on my React site before. Now, I don't want you to do this because I don't expect you to. This is just an example, remember? Just to get you guys warmed up. So what if I took my stuff from my live site, a couple weeks back, all right? So this is like what we did with our live site. And I went to our live site and I went to the build folder, right? Remember that build folder? And our live site has a bunch of stuff here for everything we did, right? So let's see if we had that build folder from week 11. Remember that build folder? Here's our build folder from week 11. This is not last week when we did Node.js, but the week before when we did our build folder. If I grab all of this and put it inside of my public folder right now, let's see what it does. If I take this, does it allow me to do it, first of all? And if I go back to my, kind of my week 13, and I go into my public folder, and I don't care about these two files, let's just wipe them out. So delete. Notice it deletes them from here too. And if I kind of paste everything in there, it actually pastes all of that, the stuff that we did for React, inside of Express here. So now we can see that we have all of React files in here. Isn't that nice? What does this do for us? If I go back to here, and if I just go to / now, then we've got our React site back. There it is. And we're using Express at the back end to have our React site work. Okay, the exact same thing that we did before. No difference. Isn't that wonderful? That's not the exercise at all, right? But that's what it allows us to do. The Express static serves all the static files we want in a specific folder. Worst case scenario, if you wanted to serve something like React, and you wanted to make your own little server to host it somewhere, that requires a back end that is Express or Node, you could use a structure like this. This is something that would totally work. And the React site you can build up like normal. You wouldn't work anywhere outside of here. Literally, your server would stay like this. You wouldn't touch it. Nothing to do anymore. And then inside the public folder, this is where you would work, right? Again, it's not what we're talking about for this part. It's just an example about what you could do if I was serving things up. This is not what I want you guys to do for your assignment 3 at all, okay? I'm just showing you what static does. Questions so far about anything that we talked about? Because now we have to move into something real. Absolutely. Let's take a quick break. Right now it's 9, right? Let's take 5 minutes. Is that okay, Sarah? And everybody else? Okay, let's take 5 minutes and we'll come back and we'll continue after this. 5 minutes. So I'll stop recording.